check out your bike, bro.
Welcome to Sun Brewing and cooking with a Guapo. It's been a couple years now, at least a couple years since I've done one of these, but I'm doing it again here. And okay, so today's episode is about 100% spontaneous ales, which is this beer is a couple years old. So I'm going to talk about how to make 100% spontaneous ale and what is 100% spontaneous ale and the significance of it. And then I'll talk about fermented bread. And when I say fermented, I mean wild fermented, spontaneous fermented, like sourdough. And I'll talk about sourdough and then what I'm doing and how they're related. Okay, so first off, I'll talk about bread. So I've been experimenting with bread, and it's wild fermented bread made from 100% spontaneous ale. And there's a school of thought that is, in order to have a sourdough, it has to have a yeast starter, which is this. This is a yeast starter from the ambient environment, straight from Canutillo, Texas, Canutillo, El Paso, Texas. The wild yeast strains, all the different ones, the microbes from there, the bacteria, it all gets in here and ferments. This is, you could consider this a form of fermented bread. I used a lot of it, I just fed it. I'll feed it again a little later, a couple days. So, sourdough, a lot of people think that the traditional way to make sourdough is to have a starter. So to make a starter, you just take a bowl, you put, well, what I do is I take equal parts water, equal parts flour, and then I squish it. So I keep squishing it with my hands. If you're a germaphobe or if you're one of these people that wash your hands every few minutes, I don't think this bread is for you, or the spontaneous ale for that matter. But the flavor builds up with the wild yeast and the bacteria over time. So when you have this yeast starter, you got equal parts, whatever you're gonna do, it doesn't, like however big you wanna make your batch of a starter. So I've used a lot, so you just replace it as you go. And then the starter, you can always have it at least a little bit to incorporate, so you don't have to keep doing it. You just add what you've used. So, but to start out with a starter, say you'll put half a cup of water, half a cup of flour in a bowl, and then you squish it with your hands. You keep squishing and squishing and squishing it with your hands because there's bacteria on your hands. There's bacteria in the flour, wild yeast in the flour, all these things, and there's bacteria in the water too. So you keep squishing and squishing it, and then it's important to use your hands. And then you get it to where it's all nice and somewhat uniform, and then you put it in some sort of a jar. Cover it with cheesecloth and let it ferment away. A good fermentation, I'd say, is about a week. Let it go 2 weeks. And then after it's fermented, then you stick it in your refrigerator to preserve it, and then you just keep adding it as you need it. Okay, and then to activate it, you'll maybe take some out and let it get to room temperature and stuff. Okay, so that is traditional sourdough. It's the concept of wild, spontaneous, 100% spontaneous fermented bread. So, circling back to that school of thought where you have to have a yeast starter, well, this beer here is 100% spontaneous fermented. It takes years. With bread, it takes days or a week. With a beer, it takes a year or years. It's like a fine wine. It just gets better with age. You can age it years and years and years. So this is somewhat the same concept. This is the solid form, this is the liquid form, but the liquid form is like the champagne of beer, literally. The wild yeast, the bacteria get in there and it ferments over a year, right? So I take this concept, but of a green, spontaneous fermented beer, somewhat not quite finished, a live beer. So I take a live beer and then I'll make it, well, that's what this is. This yeast starter isn't with water, it's with spontaneous fermented beer. So I have a batch of beer right here. This batch here didn't quite make the cut. This beer isn't to serve to drink, but it's really good for cooking. So this is good for cooking. This is 100% spontaneous ale. And I'll use it to make bread, I'll use it to cook with. So I'll use all these things here. So that's what this starter is made with. So a good gravity, a specific gravity, you would say 1020, 1030, but it needs to be a live beer. And to make your yeast starter, but over time I kind of, you know, you're gonna fail at some point, probably more earlier on, or it doesn't matter, you're gonna fail all the time, right? One of the things that I noticed, and I don't know this is a fact, but I just have a theory and I just haven't proven it yet, but I think the acidity of the beer affects the yeast starter and the bread. So I'm not saying a sour beer, a 100% spontaneous ale soured wouldn't work, because I've made one that does work. But what I am saying is that if it's too sour, if it's too acidic, it inhibits the bread and the starter. So there's just trial and error things you just kind of pick up on. You just kind of, you see patterns. Okay, so this bread here is made with a yeast starter. So this is sourdough, but with a beer starter, and this is made with beer. So, I don't really consider this real sourdough in the sense where you just have water, flour, yeast starter. It's made with beer, so it changes the texture, and the starter is made with not just beer, but 100% spontaneous ale beer. So this one was made with a starter. These two, okay, now, so this these breads here are a little different. So they still ferment, but they don't have a starter. And the reason why I started doing that is that because if I just mix live beer with some sort of flour, and you have different flours that have they give different results, like these all have different flour. So what I'll do is I'll take the live beer and I'll keep kneading it. Just keep folding it, and if you don't, kneading, if you've never made bread before, look up how to knead, look up, just a few things. This is just a guideline, this is more for somebody that's made bread and made beer before, and then I'll get into how to make 100% spontaneous ales, but it's catered toward somebody that's made beer before. So this is a variant of sourdough, and this is a variant of sourdough too, but this is the same approach that you would make a traditional sourdough. So what you do is you'll take a live beer and then you'll mix with the flour, and then you'll knead it over 48 hours. You'll keep folding it, you'll keep punching it down, you keep folding and punching it down, you'll keep kneading it with your hands. Use a machine if you like, but I use my hands. Your hands, the more wild bacteria, the more exposure to the air. You keep putting it down, you keep kneading it over 48 hours. And then plus with the live beer, it'll ferment. I've had some really good fermentations and I've had some mild ones. Like this one here is a mild one. Like if you look at the texture, you can see the different textures. Wild fermented bread has a different texture. It's just more dense. It's just really dense. And this was made with beer nuts. So I've been cooking a lot with beer nuts. Beer nuts is spent grains that I roast. You can make beer nuts all kinds of ways. You put a little brown sugar in there, even a little flour if you want. Just keep roasting it. Even a little maybe agave or honey or something. Okay, so if you understand how to make bread, then I think you would understand what I described about how to make my wild, 100% spontaneous fermented bread. So you're going to knead it over 48 hours, and then you're just going to keep letting it rise, knead it, letting it rise. Maybe check it every few hours. You could, once you think that it's starting to rise, you can put it in the refrigerator, or you can leave it out. Just cover it. Just be sure you cover it like you do any other bread that you're making, because all bread needs to be covered at least a little bit. So that's the basics of this. I'll get in maybe another video of exactly how to do it. It's just beyond the scope of what I'm doing here for this video, because it's an introduction and guideline, because I got too many things to cover. So now I want to talk about my 100% spontaneous ale for the brewers. Okay, so this beer here is approximately 2 years old. I've been selling it for almost a year, probably for like 9 months or so. It's my 6th anniversary to my top ale. Okay, so for the brewers out there, instead of pitching your yeast, everybody that's made beer, understands pitching yeast. You wouldn't pitch your yeast. You would open your fermenter up to your environment. What I do is I do it at night. I'll come in the morning, maybe approximately 8 hours, but cover it with a cheesecloth, like right there. So, and then you have an extra layer for, you'll cap it, and then, I drilled a hole in the spigot there, so that's another way to get air in there. But you need a cheesecloth to prevent whatever from flying in there or whatever. So it's the same concept as here, is have a cheesecloth. You get air in there. So so it's the exact same concept. So say whatever beer that you're going to make, let's say a pale ale grain bill or a stout grain bill, you just open up your fermenter, let it inoculate with the wild yeast and microbes from the air and bacteria. You let it get in there. You can do it for 2 hours or 3 hours. That's good. I tend to do it for 6 to 8 hours. That's good too. There's a little bit of chance involved. It's rare that I have a spontaneous ale go bad. It's rare. And I don't blend them. All mine are just, that's what you get. So over time, when you ferment one of these spontaneous ales, the first 3 months is going to be, I would say, the bulk of your fermentation if you have somewhat of a normal grain bill, normal beer. If you got some huge beer, it may be a little different. You might have to keep feeding it, because I know that I've had to keep feeding these high gravity beers. But say you just have a 5% beer pale ale, right? The bulk of your fermentation will be in your first 3 months, and it'll be, you'll be well on your way. And then after the next few months, it's hard to tell exactly. You just kind of know by you testing the gravity and tasting it. So after the bulk of the fermentation, then it goes really slow fermentation, and then somewhere in the middle, you'll have you'll taste it and you'll be like, man, all this time is wasted. All this time is wasted. So, because it tastes bad. You'll be like, but don't throw it away. trust me on this. You're gonna have to learn for yourself that it's gonna taste bad for 2 months, maybe 3, and that over time it levels out. So towards the end of it, so I have it somewhat in thirds, kind of. So there'll be a phase where you just want to dump it, but don't dump it. And then at the end of the fermentation is when it's miraculous. It's miraculous. It's like it went from wanting to dump it to, wow, this is a great beer. This is a great beer. It's a great tasting beer. And, you know, for people that love this kind of beer, they tend to be kind of real passionate, very romantic beer makers. So somebody that likes this type of beer, or that would attempt to make this kind of a beer, in general wouldn't be the Reinheitsgebot. Well, some people pronounce it Reinheitsgebot. German purity law. Like, I love a good lager. I love the German purity, the water, barley, yeast, a little bit of hops. I love all beers. But if that's you, you're probably not going to like this. If you're Belgian, you're probably going to love this. Those Belgian rebels. But if you think about it, if you're confined to, 4 variables, and that's all that you can have, it's a finite space. It's a finite domain. If you have all kinds of variables that are throughout the world, it's an infinite amount of possibilities. There's more possibilities than particles in the universe. You mathematicians, write down what I said. What I just said is true. All right. So this is my spontaneous ale I'm about to crack open. So with bread, you can make a bread bowl for soups or whatever. One of my absolute favorite things is olives. These are olives and garlic. And hot sauce. This is fermented hot sauce. This just isn't any hot sauce. So that little bread bowl there with my olives and hot sauce. So it's just a fabulous tasting thing. Hot sauce and olives is just to die for. So simple. I just kept the little cap there. You maybe have some toast or something. Put some more Frankenstein jelly on it. That's living. Having some toast, sitting down with your family and friends, just have a piece of toast with some Frankenstein jelly. Okay, so my fermented tacos. If you think about it, this right here is fermented bread. So the yeast starters. So these tortillas are fermented bread. So you have kimchi on here. You have cuaritos, if I pronounce that correctly. The pig skins. The pickled pig skins, and then I chose Munster cheese strips, capers. What else I put on there? You know what I'll put as a little cheese, little stinky cheese, and then if you wanted a little cream. So you just. So, you just got a fermented taco there. It's fermented. Something I wanted to do, and it's good for you. Okay, so that's basically it. This is my ice ale. I'm making ice beers, the freeze concentrated. This is a fermented bread too, but in a cake mold. You just fill it maybe halfway full and then it rises. It's made with beer nuts, barley grains, and my stout ganache. I have a book coming out that explains how to make a stout ganache. Basically Mexican chocolate and stout reduction. All right, so let me crack this this bottle open, and then we'll wrap this up. These were guidelines. I hope it helps you on your way to making your own recipes, which you're doing. I know this stout ganache, or maybe you can concoct something your own, or improve upon, or make your own stout ganache and your own spontaneous fermented breads and your own fermented tacos. Or I'll be right back. I'm going to come back and open this bottle. Okay, so this is an experiment here. Not a little bread I made. Looks a little funny there. I just cut a circle in there and then it kind of expanded there. All right. So it's made with beer nuts. Let me see if I can just show you what this spontaneous ale looks like. All right. Ladies and gentlemen, this is like 2-year-old 100% spontaneous ale. Man, this is, when it comes to flavor, it is impossible to get more flavor than these 100% spontaneous ales. That's why I do them. And it's the same with the concept with the 100% spontaneous fermented breads. Sourdough would be in that category. So it's not sour, maybe slightly tart with maybe raisin fig. At any rate, thank you very much. This is my first cooking with Guapo in years. I'm happy to get back in the groove here. Thank my wife for recording this raw video. I had a newborn son, Jake. He keeps me up every night. Took a break for a couple years, and I'll be back in the groove here. Thank you very much. These were guidelines. I hope they help you make some stout ganache or some fermented breads of your own, or some 100% spontaneous ales. You just have a little patience, have a little passion, crack it open in a year or two, and you'll be great. All right, peace. See you later.